Right.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the sixth episode of season 2 of This, That, and the Other. My name is Varun Chandramohan, your host for today. So, This, That, and the Other, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, is a series that tackles some of the biggest, most debated topics that both managers and employees encounter in their professional and personal lives. So far in the series, we've explored a wide variety of topics, such as the pursuit of happiness, and if it was a fool's dream or a possibility. We looked at longevity, whether it was down to genetics or choice. We looked at bias in the workplace, and when personal life choices collide with your professional life. We looked at office politics and the art of sucking up. And just last week, we spoke about disruptive HR practices and if they were easier said than done. Now, on today's show, we will be exploring a topic that's rarely spoken about in our country and around the world, and that's about expats and trailing spouses, the trials and tribulations of working abroad. Just a reminder, all our past episodes of This, That, and the Other and our webinar series are available on Luminary Learning Solutions YouTube page. Do swing by our page on YouTube and don't forget to like our videos and hit that subscribe button. All right, it's time to introduce my guest. First up, she's no stranger to the show. She's a leading authority in health and longevity with over 11 years of experience in helping people from more than 25 countries transform their health and lives. She was also a guest on episode 2 of This, That, and the Other. Michelle Jones is here with us today. Hello, Michelle. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, it's good to be back. It's a very different topic, but very exciting.
Oh, absolutely. And the pleasure is ours. My second guest is a shipping, petroleum, and supply chain management professional with over 10 years of experience in international shipping, bunkering, and projects. He's currently overseeing the commercial development at ASP Ships Group in Melbourne, Australia. Anu Harasgama is here with us today. Hello, Anu. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Arun. Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for inviting me to the program. And it's a very exciting topic that you're going to talk about today. I'm all ready to contribute my perspective as well.
Oh, that sounds good. And the pleasure is ours, Anu. And finally, he's a compliance professional with a strong experience across financial crime and regulatory compliance with global trade, receivables, financing, and retail banking. He's currently the global head of financial crime compliance at HSBC UK. Kaushika Ruangala is here with us today. Hello, Kaushika. Nice to have you on the show.
Arun, thank you. Good morning. I think it's still dark here in the UK, and really happy to join and talk through the experiences with all of you guys. As you know, I did this myself. So to any of you who are excited to take a step outside of your home country, let's talk through some of those experiences.
All right, that's brilliant. Thank you for being here. All right, so usually we start off our conversation by asking the panel to define a particular subject or a theme and then tell us why it matters. But our topic for today warrants a different approach. So let's start with a brief intro about yourself. Tell us your story, in a really brief manner, so that our audience can relate to your experience and the little nuggets of wisdom that you will be sharing throughout this show. So I'd like to start with you, Anu. What's your story?
Hi, Varun. Thanks again. Good morning, everybody. Those who are joining, or good afternoon, wherever you are joining from. My experience and the background has been I've been in the banking and IT industry for over 12, 13 years, and then I shifted into shipping and petroleum industry about 10 years ago or 10, 12 years ago. And having worked for a large conglomerate and heading one business in Colombo and working for one of the challenging companies and in a very senior role, I decided to migrate to Australia because I had the permanent residency status for over 5 years in my hand. But
Sure.
At the last minute, we decided to go. We thought not to give up and take the opportunity and use it for my family's benefit. For myself, my further studies, and also I have a daughter who's a teenager now, who's about 13 plus. My expectation was to, take this opportunity to, get the advantage of a developed country than Sri Lanka and get more access to education and other facilities. That was my real intention when I moved to Australia in late 2018. Of course, before we go, we did, we went and planned where to stay and what the house, what are the furniture, the car and everything that we want to buy. But yeah, there are a lot of other things that you need to look at as well. That I only realized when we moved there how it really affects our day-to-day life, how it affects our to our mental well-being.
Sure.
Although it was my intention and my family had to follow me, I really didn't have an idea how it affects to my wife and daughter as well. So those are some of the critical things that I also realized personally by myself over a period of time, because when you're really going overseas, when we really have a plan, of course you have a lot of expectation and excitement, but it has to, you have to really see that whether that excitement will remain after few months, because when you get used to the new society, new environment, so everything's become very normal. And after that only you realize, our rhythm which we had for many years is not there anymore. So you don't have the access to your family, sometimes the close siblings, your parents or loved ones, or what you have been doing over a long period of time. And how it affects your mentality is a great concern, actually. You have to be ready in that manner as well, although you are ready physically. When you take that decision, you need to really question whether you are ready mentally in that journey. That is something that to look at, I think. So let the others also contribute.
Sure.
I will keep on adding as we go on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we'll dive into each of the sections that you did mention, and obviously it'll be a interesting area to talk about. So real quick, we'll move to maybe Kaushika. Kaushika, tell us, your story in a nutshell. Where were you, and where are you now, and is your family with you, and what do you do, and so on.
Well, Varun, thank you. I think that's a fantastic question, right? So just a brief introduction. Varun did this, but titles in our organization can be confusing. So I'll try and explain what I do currently. I globally head up compliance for one of HSBC's biggest businesses, the global trade finance business. It's roughly a $4 billion business. So if you look at it, that's probably bigger than some of the well-known banks in this world, that unit of HSBC alone. And I'm proud to be actually heading up compliance globally for that unit. But of course, I think like with everyone else, I started quite small in Sri Lanka in HSBC many years ago in 2005. And by about 2012, I realized that I probably hit my career ceiling. If I wanted to grow further, then I'd probably have to spend another 10 years before I get into the next grade, because of course the attrition at more senior levels was quite low. And the fantastic thing with an organization such as HSBC, and I think many large companies, global companies, is that they also offer you the opportunity to move between their offices. And I was lucky enough back in 2012 to make use of one of these opportunities to actually migrate across to the UK, which is where our head office is, based out of Canary Wharf in London. And then I've of course now been in the UK for 8 years, a citizen of the UK as well, right? But I think lots of trials and tribulations, lots of learning experiences throughout that journey, right? The ambition, of course, got me here. When we moved, it was just by myself and my wife, right? So one could say that when you're either single or you're just a married couple, sometimes the move is easier. You don't have to consider the needs of 3 or 4 people, right? But life, it's a tough move anyway. So happy to talk through some of those experiences, what prompted me to make that decision.
Sure.
And any questions that you have, Varun?
Oh no, I mean, we'll dive into the different areas as we go, and Kaushik, and I'm sure you have a wealth of information that you can share, and with regards to that. So we'll move on to Michelle real quick, and then I'll ask some interesting questions, and we'll have some dialogue on certain things. So Michelle, what's your story?
Hi, Varun. Well, with me, I'm the trailing spouse. I'm the woman that followed her husband. I'm married to an Australian diplomat. So we've been married for 20 years. We just celebrated our anniversary. But since the time we got married, we've been moving. Thank you. We've been moving every 3 years on average. So for those of you that are watching, that are wanting to do this move, I think it's very important to take into account the trailing spouse, because very little is realized about what the trailing spouse actually has to go through. Sure. We have moved and lived in 4 different countries. We've, when you ask my children what their favorite posting is, they actually include Australia as a posting, because we have never been in Australia long enough to actually just, make it seem like a different place, like home. So we were talking earlier with Anton, and Anton was saying, sometimes you need to be in a home and not a house. But we have actually made it a point to call wherever we are, no matter what part of the world we're in, a home, as long as we're all together. So I think, stuff like that should be taken into account, what the spouse is going to do. Sure. Different countries have different rules with diplomatic moves as well, and with the different visa classifications in different countries. Sometimes only one spouse can work, so the trailing spouse is left doing what have you, right? Yeah. So if you're looking at doing something like this for the long haul, you have to take into account, is the wife or the husband, whoever the trailing spouse is, willing to put their career on hold. So we started traveling with 3 children, so 2 kids and a baby. And then we added another baby along the way. And this time around, our posting is in Indonesia. Right. And we now only have 2 of our siblings. After COVID hit and we've come back, when we do go back into Jakarta again, we're only left with 1. So that's how long our journey's been. The, like what the others have said, the structure of our family dynamics have changed. And it's a lot of fun, a lot of adventure, a lot of learning, a lot of different languages and different cultures learned, a lot of funny, how do you say it, characteristics for each nationality. We've learned all of that. We've learned that, in Korea, when you say "Andeo," you usually have your hand and you do this. In Sri Lanka, when they say yes or yeah, you don't know if it's a yes, a no, or a maybe. Right. So each country has their own different tidbits that we've actually been able to pick up and learn, which is great. So there's a lot of beauty in traveling and learning, and for our children to learn all these things along the way. Sure. But there's a lot of difficulties that have to be taken into account. So I'd like to be able to share that, considering that we've moved so much and not really settled just in one place. Right. Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that, Michelle. So now we can start exploring different areas. And what I thought of doing was to leave the last 15 minutes or so to have like a rapid fire round where we ask you, like your best moments, your biggest fear, and sort of that sort of thing. So let's begin with the preparation. How much time did you have to prepare before you were sent on an assignment, before you moved? So I'm assuming, Anu, you might have had. You said you had your PR for 5 years, but then you hadn't made the move, right?
Yeah.
So how soon between, okay, let's move, and then actually moving? Like what was that period like? And did you have to get rid of the stuff in Sri Lanka, or is that taken care of by somebody else? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, that was a tough process actually. Although we were holding it for 5 years, we really didn't have the the plan to move out of Australia, until the last minute actually. So we were just holding on, and because one thing is it was tough for us to leave our families here and move to somewhere else, because all of us, including myself and wife, and including my kid, and we were very close to our parents, and the kid. And to grandparents and the siblings and all. So it was a tough decision for us to take actually. That's what we were holding on for a long time. But I was actively involving in my industry, in my profession, and at the place where I was working, and I was traveling heavily. All around for my profession, because I was in the oil and gas and shipping industry, and it was required to travel a lot actually, very frequently. With all that actually, with the career that I had here, there was no reason for me to move out. I was progressing really well. But at the end of the day, we were just thinking, whether we should lose this or not. Whether to stay here, or whether we need to go there and get improve ourselves, get some more skills added. That was my first intention, was of course to get some more exposure, some add some more qualification into myself, and also give the same to my daughter and get some more international experience. That was the main intention. So we prepared for, I would say, for over a period. I've been traveling back and forth to Australia, thinking where to settle, whether it was in Sydney, or because we had siblings or and friends in Sydney, and we had same number of people in Melbourne. So we were thinking where to go, what is the best place to live. And so we were just having conversation with our friends all over, and to see what is the best decision we need to take. So having gone through that process only, we thought we'll go to Melbourne, because we have more friends there, so we have access to more people there. And well, its livelihood also is better. If you look at the Sri Lankan community in Sydney is spread around different places, but if you look at Sydney, there are places who are there are a lot of Sri Lankan, and you have so many shops. You have you don't feel alienated. You feel like you are in Sri Lanka, because wherever you go, you meet Sri Lankan people. Wherever you go, you have shops, groceries, and you have people use the same Sinhalese language, so you don't feel that you are in a different world. That also made us comfortable to go there. So that was one reason. Physically, those things were really good. So that was a preparation process actually, since we have been going 2-3 times, and we found where to live, house, and everything, and the school, and we also contacted our friends to find what the best school for my daughter. We wanted her to get into a similar school, because my daughter has been studying in one of the leading Catholic convent in Sri Lanka. So we wanted a similar school back in Australia as well. So we are finding out all those options that we have available in Australia and back in Melbourne. So it took about more than 1 year, I think, for us to transfer all this thing, and have our bank accounts ready, and have the place ready, and also dispose what we have in Sri Lanka. And we were thinking whether to rent our properties and go, or whether we need to close it and go. And we had different thought process that going on back and forth. So it's a bit of a longer process. I would say at least preparation was for about almost a year, although like we had the PR, the last 1 year was the time that we had to prepare. So that's the time that it took for me, but that is not the end. That is just the beginning actually. And there's a lot more to do after we move there. So that's only we really experience the challenges although we have physically moved there.
Understood. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So do I have
Michelle
more time to continue?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Kaushika to continue.
Yeah, we can come back. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I'll add a perspective, Warren, on this, if I may, because I think Anu was lucky to have a PR. In the other side of this, didn't have that option. Right? So I think I get asked this question, Warren, actually quite surprisingly quite a few times by a number of people who actually want to move abroad. How do you do it? What prompted you? How was it? Right? And I think for me, the process of deciding to move abroad probably started, I thought, maybe 2 years in advance of me actually leaving the country. Right. And the reason this was important for me was we had to be very careful of where we wanted to move, right? And I think my advice to a lot of people who say, listen, I want to move abroad, I want to move now and my first advice is take your time, right? Because you want to be able to move to a country which you think you can survive in, both yourself and your spouse and your kids. And I think Michelle made a very good point. There are countries where your spouse is actually not able to work. I initially got offered a position in the Middle East. We consciously decided that we didn't want to take up that option, and instead was waiting for an option around the UK. So my first thing is, listen, take your time, right? Once you move, it's a harder step for you to then pack everything back and come back across to, let's say, Sri Lanka or the country that you started from. So take your time, figure out where you want to go, right? And once that decision has been made, usually if you are waiting for a visa, these things take a very long time. So I started my process for actually interviewing for my position in about February of that year. But by the time I actually left the country, it was November. So it's almost 9 months before I actually boarded the flight and was actually landed in the country that I wanted to. Because there is so much of uncertainty. You might be the most successful candidate for a job. Your organization might sponsor you, but then there's a whole administration process around visas, sponsorship that takes that length of time for you to get there. But I think in a way, that's actually not a bad thing, because it then gives you the opportunity to settle off your requirements in your home country. For me, it was great because the last month of my time here in Sri Lanka, I left the organization that I was working in, and I wanted to spend a month with my family, because I realized that's probably the biggest piece that I was going to miss when I go across, and spending that quality time and remembering that was becoming more important for me. Because the moment you land, I was never going to come back in the first year of me landing there, because there was so much to get used to, so much to learn, so much to adapt to, that you had to take your time to settle into that culture. But my ask is, do consider where you're going carefully, right? Because that plays a huge role on where you land and how successful you are, and take your time doing it, right? Now, people in today's world are far more flexible in traveling. They are global citizens, right? So think back 15, 20 years. In order to get people to travel abroad, you had to, in most instances, give secondment options, right? But nowadays, people are actually quite flexible. They will pack up their suitcases and move, right?
Sure.
But your success depends on you moving to the right place, you landing the right job, and of course, your family being comfortable with that scenario. Because let's not forget, we are emotional animals. And how emotionally connected and the well-being of our family plays a huge part in how we become successful.
Oh, absolutely. So this is going to be a little interesting. So both Anu and Kaushik have, to a certain extent, the choice of location was within your reach. You had control over where you wanted to go. Now, Michelle, did you have a choice? I'm assuming you did.
To a certain extent, I guess I did. As I was saying earlier, the decision has to be made by the couple. You have to talk about how you're going to do this, and is it worth all the dramas of the move, of moving the kids to a different school. But see, the diplomatic corps works slightly differently. So our first move from Australia to Jakarta, Indonesia. So about 18 years ago, we were posted to Indonesia. That we actually had about, I think, a year at least to prepare for that move.
Right.
And the reason for that was because my husband's position needed to learn the language. So he needed to do language training in Australia. Now, from Jakarta, we thought we were going home. I had my stuff made, I had my furnitures made. Everything was cheap in Jakarta. So living in London and having experienced Melbourne as well, how furniture is so expensive in these parts of the world. But in Asia, it's so cheap. So I had everything done because I was so sure we were going home. And I think it was about 6 months or less, 6 months or 5 months to the end of our posting, I was told, whoops, what about Korea? Would you consider Korea? And I go, oh, but I've got all this stuff that I've already had made. Yeah. How am I going to survive, bringing them into Korea? They go, oh, no, there's no dramas there. And I had to think about it. I go, oh my God, I grew up in Asia. I grew up in the Philippines. Sure, Australia had winters, but Korea winters are different. Like in Canberra, where I live, you don't even see the snow. I mean, you get the frost on the ground and then that's it. You'd have some snowfall, or you've got ice on the windshield, but the snow doesn't rise here in Canberra. Korea, you see the cars covered with snow. And I go, okay, am I going to survive that? And they go, yeah, sure. Okay, fine. 6 months was the time frame. So I had to get our stuff ready, figure out what we were going to get rid of, what we couldn't bring to Korea, because now you're realizing, hold on, my stuff has to get to Korea, then Korea back to Australia.
Right.
And from Korea, they said, nah, that's it, you're going home. Okay, fine, awesome, I'm going home. And then I think it was about just 3 months or 4 months before we were about to go, my husband invites me for coffee and he goes, and he's holding the Lonely Planet guide, okay? This is how my husband surprises me, guys. He's holding the Lonely Planet guide and it says Sri Lanka. And I go, where the hell is that? What's that place? I've never heard of Sri Lanka before. And, he goes, oh, it's a really good place. It's a tropical island, blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay, whatever, I'll follow you wherever you want to go. Let's do this. And he goes, can't be any different from Jakarta or the Philippines. It's Asia. I go, fine. And then if you've ever been to Korea where life is so fast, we went to Colombo and had the shock of our life because everything was slow, right? Everyone was in island time. Everything was just relax and, take your time in doing everything. So anyway, that was fine. Took us about, I think, 3 months or 5 months in total, because we always head back home, do our shots and everything before we head back, the visas. So unlike with you guys where you actually take longer, diplomatic visas are issued quicker because it's a government thing. From Sri Lanka back, that was obviously easy because we were heading back home. From Australia to Papua New Guinea, we had, I think, about 8 months to prepare for that move. Again, Papua New Guinea was a different story. I said, no way. What the hell are you talking about? In the end, again, we had to sit down and talk about, okay, what does this mean for my husband's career? What does it mean for mine? I'm a naturopath. Am I going to be able to practice there? And so on and so forth. And by this time, I had kids who were slightly older. So the kids that traveled with us from Jakarta, Korea, Colombo, weren't with us anymore. They're both in university. We now had 2 younger kids traveling with us for this second post. And kids who were very smart and had access to internet and were Googling what's Papua New Guinea like, and if you've ever Googled Papua New Guinea, they say headhunters. They have headhunters in Papua New Guinea. So my kids are going, why are we going there? So the decision making was a little bit more difficult, but at the end of the day, we've always made it a point that we give the kids the input, we give them the chance to voice their concerns, but decision is made by myself and my husband. So the final decision to actually go, I think, ended up becoming 6 months after, because we had to really mentally psych for it.
Right.
From Papua New Guinea back to Indonesia, I think it was just another, maybe 4 months or 6 months. So we never really had all this time to check out the schools, check out what was going on. We only ever did a look-see once, and that was the second trip back to Jakarta because our kids weren't quite sure what they were going into, and they were more concerned. So in terms of time frame, there wasn't a lot of time frame to actually get ready. It was more really, I think in this case, because we've been together for so long, our relationship is such that we just sit down and we go, okay, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for me? And, you know, after the experiences from the different posts, I think towards the decision to go back to Indonesia again a second time, it was okay, well, we already know I can't work in Jakarta. What am I going to do now? And so on and so forth. Like I was saying when we first said hello, happy wife, happy life. So my husband had to take all that into account. But yes, there wasn't a lot of like time frame to really assess everything properly. So if you're looking at getting into postings in the diplomatic corps or living such a life, I think you have to, at an earlier stage, be in agreement about what the goal is of your family. I've created my business so that I can do it no matter where I am, because I've realized that, you know, my husband loves what he's doing, and as long as we can both find harmony in and balance in our life and in our career, doesn't really matter where we go. You know, we can go to Whoop Whoop for all we know, and we'll be fine.
I was actually going to ask you, Michelle, and then I'll go around the table and I'll ask Kaushik and Anu as well. I mean, that's quite a lot of moves. And were you, did you have to learn the language, the local language, just like your husband had to? Because I think Kaushika and Anu, in that sense, I mean, they were moving into a country where they were speaking English, so that aspect of it was more or less sorted. But from your perspective, did you have to also go through some sort of a cultural training along with your husband and pick up the languages and things like that? Or that's question number one. And then two is that, were you able to work in these places, or did you have to rediscover yourself and kind of change your career, or kind of take on a career path that would make you a global citizen, and it's not dependent on where you are? I know it's a loaded question, but yeah.
That's
and then we can go around the table and ask them as well.
Yep. So in terms of did I have to learn the language? I learned Indonesian together with my husband. I speak Filipino, so learning Indonesian after knowing Filipino wasn't very difficult. I picked up the language very quickly. It took me just 3 months to be fluent in the language. Going to Korea, I studied for about a month. Got a bit frustrated because the way they taught Korean is that you have to learn the characters first. So, you know, I'd walk around whatever, Itaewon or Gangnam, and I'd read the signs, but I didn't know what they meant, because I could read them, but I didn't know exactly what it, you know, it's how do you call by character. Each character had a syllable, so I could say it, but I didn't know what it meant. So I was telling my husband, I need survival Korean. I can't do this this course. So I did learn how to communicate in Korean, but I wasn't a formal speaker. Like I could ask for a bargain, which I loved so much, and I could, you know, give directions. I could get home. I could place an order in a restaurant. So it was enough to survive. When I got to Sri Lanka, I did study again for a month. I studied skip my mind.
Sinhalese,
Tamil was what I was studying. And again, with the characters, like, oh my God, you know, like I really don't like all these brown.
It's like these jalebis, you know, that Indian.
I know, right? It's like, oh, I'm not going to use that. I'm not going to write a book. I'm not going to read the newspaper. I just want to be able to speak. So honestly, I think Sri Lanka was the most difficult place to learn the language, because everyone spoke English. And it even if I tried to speak the language, they would just look at me and they'd speak English. So I go,
Oh,
okay,
right.
you know, I give up. I'm just gonna. I would always joke that I could say all these different things in the different languages, but in Sri Lanka, the only thing I can say is watura to ask for water, and something like hari hari, yeah, you know, and Papua New Guinea is very interesting. Everyone speaks English, but I loved Pidgin. It was just so interesting that I actually learned. I had a lot of Papua New Guinean friends, and I asked them to teach me Pidgin. And it's just a funny language. I just loved it. So it wasn't necessary for me to learn as per the government side. They didn't think I had to learn, but I felt like to have the full experience of the country I was living in, I had to learn the language. Or in Sri Lanka, if I couldn't learn the language, I had to learn the culture. I had to be able to, you know, enjoy their food. I had to be able to wear a sari, for example, and survive going to a party wearing a sari. That was so hard. And you know, just understanding the different ways that people dealt with situations according to their culture. So there's a lot of learning for the traveling spouse, because you have to remember that the spouse, the trailing spouse, stays home, organizes the children, organizes with the staff, organizes with everything that the family needs. And if you don't know the language, depending on where you're at, or you don't know the culture, it's going to be very hard to actually get the job done.
Sure.
In terms of working, my favorite post, when you asked me in terms of work, was Sri Lanka. I had the best practice in Sri Lanka because I could work. Jakarta, I couldn't work. Korea, I couldn't take money. So I actually worked as an intern in a holistic clinic in Korea. And my services was kind of reciprocated in terms of goods, you know, like I'd give them a service, I'd get chiropractic adjustment in exchange or what have you. So yeah, but it was a very good way to actually be exposed to the different illnesses of the different countries, or the different cultural differences of how they feel or think about an illness. And I found that really valuable. So I didn't mind that. Again, Sri Lanka, it was the best. I had a good clinic. I'm still connected with that clinic in Colombo, Revival Physical Medicine Center. And having that clinic and having that normalcy where I had a career and my husband had a career made that posting just amazing for us. Not to mention all the bloody cricket in that country. My whole family are cricket fanatics, except for myself. And I mean, I have to say, I guess I love cricket now because of them, but it's the longest game to watch, right? But it was amazing. So when you ask my kids what the favorite place is, it's Korea because of that. Sorry, Sri Lanka because of that. PNG, I worked with a women's group. Papua New Guinea is not very easy to go around in. Security is quite difficult. And we would go around with backup security, or you know, you had your radio with you so that if anything happened, you could radio back. And so it was just a bit difficult to actually practice. I would see clients and, you know, go to them and do work with them. I did a lot of coaching. So I started my coaching when I got to PNG because of that reason. And realizing as well that this was going to be my life until my husband got sick of traveling. I needed to reinvent myself. I couldn't just rely on being in a clinic, because that meant that I would set up the clinic. It would take me about 6 months to set up the clinic after I found the perfect clinic. And it would take me 6 months to get, you know, to end my practice in that clinic before we had to go. So coaching just made it good. So in Jakarta now, that's what I do. I do a lot of coaching. I do a lot of online work. I travel a lot for lectures and courses. Yes.
Very, very nice. Very nice. So I'm going to. I mean, obviously, Michelle, your scenario is very unique in the sense so many countries, so many different languages, so many different cultures. So I'm going to now move to Anu, and then I'll move to Kaushik. So Anu, how did your spouse, what was her process? Was she able to work in Australia? Did she carve out a career for herself, or like what was her experience like in your eyes?
Yeah, Varun, thanks again. Yeah. Actually, it has been a real challenging task for my family, especially. Actually, my wife was not working during the last few years before we left Sri Lanka, but she was initially in the finance field, and later she was in the daycare and Montessori industry. Her intention was to get into daycare and Montessori in Australia as well. But what matters was during the period that we went and settled ourselves, and what was more challenging for them was to make up their mind that they're away from the family, away from the parents and their siblings, and for my daughter being a teenager, 13 plus, and it was very challenging for her to be away from their friends from the school, making up friends in a new environment, was really challenging. And also my wife's mother was with us for more than 10 years, and leaving her and going was the most difficult task for my wife actually. And she was not well as well, and we had to leave her with her siblings and go. But she was also always worried about her mother, and how she was doing, because she was not physically well, and at that age, that was the main concern of her. Although she was planning to start working, and unfortunately, during this period only the pandemic starts, and our intention was to travel frequently. We were thinking of travel during every holiday of my daughter, like we get at least 2 weeks holiday during the semesters. Our intention was to travel, at least my wife and daughter, to travel back to Sri Lanka and look after the mother and do the needful, because we had the possibility of coming to Sri Lanka at any day, because there were daily flights. But unfortunately, with this COVID, everything held up, and mobility was completely stopped, and we couldn't move at all. And unfortunately, my wife lost her mother during this period, and we couldn't even come to Sri Lanka. And though that was a big shock to our life actually, and that was a major shock to our life, and also for my daughter, because she was also very close to the grandmother, and that was not something that we had prepared for. That was not something that we expected, because we expected to come at any time that we had the need. So that was quite challenging, and for anybody who's traveling, or a spouse, or even for yourself, before you go, and you have to think how prepared you are mentally to face these kind of challenging situations. This is something that we never expected, and we never had a contingency plan for something like this, because there's nothing that we can do. So but that'll this feeling will live with you for the entire life, and you can never get rid of it. So you need to have your mental preparedness also when you go, and especially when it's either husband or wife moves. Even if say suppose one party has to sacrifice and forego his career, and you need to really think whether you are really ready for that, and whether it affects your children, whether it affects your career, and whether you are really prepared mentally to take up these new challenges in a new environment. Because although you have access to every physical things, once things become fully normalized and you become just a part of the society, and then you will not see the excitement that you were experiencing over a period of time at the beginning. So you need to have that readiness, like whoever who goes, like if Expats is going, if some say office is send you on a second month for 2 or 3 years. My advice is always, any management to talk to the family also. not only the employer, because if employee obviously must be willing to go, because obviously, for career advance or for career purposes, is compelled to go. But behind the employee, you see another family is coming, and the family's matters affects the employee also at the end of the day, because he has to perform in a free environment. If the family is not happy, if family is having issues, if children are facing issues, the spouse is facing issues, and the spouse has to sacrifice his or her career, those things matters a lot at the end of the day, and you might not get the same productivity that you expect from your employee. Those are some of the concerns. So you need to even your company wants to send somebody, you need to tell them the actual background of the place where you're going, and what they should expect when they go, and what challenges they have. Educate them, give them a real picture of the place where they go. So, and send them with that mental preparedness. And if it is really challenging, that they need to take a decision whether that they really need to go and all, because the company also will not get this productivity or the results that they expect, if they send somebody without giving the proper picture. Right. I would say, if a company sends, please always, I think always, talk to the families, talk to the spouse or children individually, look at their needs, and take a holistic picture of the entire family before you send somebody, so that you will have a better productive person or outcome at the end of the day. I think that's something to look at.
Yeah.
In my case, it was the same actually, although I did it personally, but I had the same challenges.
Oh, absolutely, Anu, I completely agree. And Kaushika, we're very curious to know your side of the story as well. Like what did your spouse go through? You said it was just your spouse, right? Your kids. You didn't have your kids at that time. So what was the process like, and how did she fare and so on? Yeah. Kaushika, you might be on mute.
Right. I think I'm back.
No,
okay. Well, I think that's a really good question, because language was, we are fortunate that language was not a problem, right? We had, I think Michelle mentioned as well, a lot of Sri Lankans do speak English. And when we moved to the UK, that was very easy. The culture was, I think, the bigger problem, adoption, right? When I say bigger problem, I had studied in Sri Lanka in what we call an international school, to a British curriculum, right? So very, very familiar with their history and their culture. But I think every country that you land into, they have their own mannerisms that you have to get used to. And I think that probably played the biggest part in adapting to a country. The culture of people around you, and I think the culture in your workplaces as well. So, working in an office in Sri Lanka and working in an office in the UK is a completely different environment on people's expectations, how they behave. And I think this was, one, it was probably easier for me to adapt because I had a lot more interaction on a day-to-day basis. For my wife, she initially actually went to complete her studies. So she had a very successful career in Sri Lanka. Then at one point she decided she wants to take a different route. She wanted to become a lawyer. It made perfect sense because she started her qualifications while she was in Sri Lanka with a British university, and that enabled her, when we went to the UK, to actually finish off the qualification. She of course successfully did that, then sought a career in that field, and then she came back and actually joined HSBC as a lawyer. But I think during that whole process, cultural adoption for me, I think is probably always is going to be a difficult challenge for people. But think of the countries that you go to. London is a very diverse place, so you have a lot of people with a lot of different cultures coming in. It's a melting pot, right? So the opportunities for you to embrace that is a lot higher, right? In today's world, I have in my teams people that work for me. I have people with so many different cultures coming from so many different parts of the world. And I think one of the most important things I think one needs to think of, and Anu mentioned this when you were speaking, when you mentioned COVID, is that it can be a very lonely place if you're single and you don't have the family support and backing, right? There was an article that the CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, wrote very recently, and he said there's a 15% population of people in between their 20s and 30s who moved from different countries, or they're all by themselves in a different country in a studio flat with zero social interaction for the last 6 months, who are going to suffer permanently as a result of the situation that we're in. So, unexpected situations, and I think part of planning for all of this is to whatever extent possible, to plan for unexpected situations, right? Just going back to the culture point, I'll tell you a bit of a funny story that I went through. As part of the citizenship process in the UK, you have to go through a test called Life in the UK test, which is about proving to the people that you've actually adapted to this culture, the history of this country and so on. And there are some very interesting and tricky questions on this, right? So I decided to go for the test, and the book that you study is actually quite thick, right? But I thought, listen, I've studied the British curriculum for all of these years. It's not like it can't be that difficult, right? So let me just go and do the test. In fact, actually, the test was not too difficult, right? I passed the test. They had like 45 minutes. I finished in 10 minutes, came out, and I passed. But I remember one of the questions very well. One of the questions that I got was, what do you call the guards of the Tower of London? So the people who guard the Tower of London, what are they called? I was like, I really can't remember. Then it clicked to me. In the UK, there's a bottle of gin called Beefeaters.
Correct.
I think, and you always remember the drawing in front of it, and actually it is the Beefeater. So the fact that I had been drinking a lot of gin over the last few years while in the UK, which is of course one of their biggest drinks as well, helped me to pass one of those questions.
Right.
But I think the subtle message in there is, if you do come to London, have some gin.
Right. Absolutely. That's.
We will join you next time, Kaushika, in London.
For sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, of course, welcome for a drink. But listen, I think UK language is not a problem, but a lot of countries, a language is a problem. The other thing, though, is if you come to a place in Europe, UK, France, any one of these countries, they're a very connected continent, right? So if you're in the UK, I can drive down to France in half an hour from the closest border point in the UK. Right. So getting across the continent and traveling is a very easy thing, right? But it also then means, as part of my job, I was very frequently traveling into Europe. And then Europe is a diverse blend of languages, cultures, all people who are proud of their own cultures and their own language, right? So one thing that I got, one thing that was helpful for me was because I used to do a lot of traveling into France, and I had done French till when I was in school in Sri Lanka, and all of a sudden, I had completely forgotten my French, and then all of a sudden, all the French that you learn when you're in school comes back immediately into you. So listen, language I think is hugely important, right? The UK, I think, and a few other countries, you're lucky, but if you want to move to any of the emerging economies in Asia today, you have to learn a language. So I think that's a huge advantage if you do.
Understandable. So I think we're coming down to our last 10 minutes. 5 minutes, but hopefully we can stretch this by about 5 minutes. So I'm glad that I wanted to ask you questions about what was the most challenging aspects, what were the most scariest aspects, what took you by surprise. But I'm glad that you're weaving that into the conversation, so that allows me to dive into an important topic that we absolutely need to cover today. To do justice for this topic, and that's about children. When you travel and when you keep moving, and Michelle, I'm sure you'll have so much. So we'll come to you last because with multiple countries and I can only imagine what that process would have been like. Making new friends and then having to say goodbye and then making new friends. And so let me start with Kaushika, because Kaushika, you were just responding to the previous question. So is it safe to say that because your kids were born in England, so they were
I'm jumping straight there because I'm sorry, I'm messaging Anton on WhatsApp as well. I don't have kids, right?
Oh,
so
right.
I think
Okay.
the question of kids to my fellow panelists, but I can help you out as
okay. All right. Okay. Nice. So over to you, Anu.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, so it was quite challenging, but on the topic that you're talking, I think the age also matters when you move from one country to another. Like, for a youngster, the challenges are different from a person of middle age, because if you are a middle age, like Michelle or myself, we're moving around with children is very challenging. Because their expectation, their requirements are also different actually, and ultimately you need to look at their mental well-being. That's quite important, and having either if you have very small children, age of 2 or 3 years, they might not feel it really very much, but if you have a child who has grown up in a one culture for about 10-12 years, and then when suddenly when children are also going through their changes in their life, like from childhood to a teenager, during that period, when child is moving to a different culture, is really challenging, as that's what I experienced in my move to Australia. That's quite tough actually. You need to really educate them, and tell them exactly what we are going to do, what expectation, why we are going, and what is the reason, what we are going to expect achieve at the end of the day. You need to educate your children as well, otherwise their focus also will be misled, because they need to really give a thorough education or guidance as to what they need to do, because what you expect in different cultures, it could be totally different. You might not get, for example, in Sri Lanka, children are very close, and they help each other, but if you look at Australian society, children, of course, although they're helpful and they don't mind other things, they don't even ask your score, even if you do a test, they don't ask your score. They might not even they appreciate privacy. But in Sri Lanka, it's not, although of course we respect that, it's not that much. But in Australia, it's different. But my daughter told me, like initially in the school, like, of course they don't, one day she was absent from the school, and, and the next day nobody asked about why she was absent. Right. But in Sri Lanka, it would have been different. The next day morning, everybody would have come around and asked, my God, what happened? Why didn't come to school yesterday? Though initially she was really feeling upset about it. They are not concerned about me. They don't mind because I'm new, and they are not really keen about me. But that was not the case. But it's different in the culture and in society. So those types of cultural shocks are there, when you go. And also at the end of the day, it's about your social network and social capital you have. How much of friends and families, so you get to know this culture little by little, rather than being isolated. So that's something which is important. So children are very, very important topic in this subject. Actually, you have to give them proper understanding, guidance. Otherwise, you might face difficulties later on. So that's very important fact actually.
Sure, thank you, Anu. Michelle, what I do not even want to open that door, because go for it, Michelle. Tell us. I'm sure it would have been quite an experience.
Yeah. We travel with 2 different batches, right? So the first set of our postings, we had teenagers that went with us and a baby. So it was difficult because that was the height when we actually got posted in Indonesia the first time around. That was the height of the bombings. So I always told people, we were in Indonesia for 3.5 years and 3 bombings. And that was also when everything was very conservative. Right. So I had teenagers studying in international schools where everyone was wearing short skirts and shorts. And I had to tell them, look, you need to understand this is a Muslim country. They're very conservative. You need to watch what you're wearing. And, it's always, but my friends do this and my friends do that. And I always say, but you need to understand the culture of the country. So I do agree with Anu that there's a lot of education that happens before you go to a post. The kids need to understand where they're heading to. Another post where that was really important was Papua New Guinea. So,
Right.
Kaushika, I sent you a message. I said, I saw your facial expression when I said headhunters. They do still have headhunters in Papua New Guinea. And with the security as well, we had to tell the kids, look, you can't just go out. You can't get out of the campus. You have to wait for the car to go into the driveway. If we're going to go and watch a movie, or actually, we only ever did that like once or twice, and I was so scared. But people from there would laugh at me if I said this because, to them, they're so used to the environment that that's okay. But being someone who's not from there, I think there are more things that you need to be aware of and be careful of. So, a lot of education, and the kids have to be understanding that although they go into an international school where kids kind of think the same way, the environment outside that school is different. Papua New Guinea, we also had a compound, so our kids interacted with all the other Aussies in the compound. So heading out was like, okay, we got to switch that mindset. It's a different environment out there. We have to be a bit more cautious. We can't just walk around and leave mom or be on our own because, again, security was a big risk.
Michelle, can I just interject there and just for the benefit of our audience and me, who are these headhunters? Because they're obviously not recruiters.
Okay. No, not recruiters. That's right. People that literally cut off your head as prize winning because they've, Papua New Guinea is a very tribal community.
Right.
So, you'd see people walking on the streets with their, how do you call it? Their big axe, right?
Right. Okay.
Or there was one time our helpers came over because we had staff over there, and our staff came. And I said, what's going on? Why do you guys look so exhausted? And they said, oh, last night, this other tribe came and hacked our leader. And I go, hacked? What do you mean hacked? Like hacked, hacked with an axe. Yeah. And he said, so we went back there and we're going to, do the same to them. But when the different tribes, and their tribe was not an axe tribe, their tribe was a bow and arrow tribe. So now they went off with their bow and arrows and, attacked the other group. So Kashika, it's very funny, but it's very real. It's also a society where when we were there, and it's quite sad, although things are slowly changing, but when we were there, I was getting a live feed of a woman that was being whipped towards the center of town to be burned at stake because she was charged as a witch. So, had we not been in those environments, we would never believe, or it would be very difficult to believe that those things still exist in this day and age. PNG was just 5 years ago. So we got out of PNG about 2 years ago. So because of that environment, our kids have to be extra careful, right? So I'd always go, yes, let's have a lot of PNG friends, but let's understand what their sensitivities are. You need to learn to listen more and be aware of what they're saying. And the good thing is, there are all these communities are very, respectful as well of where we're coming from. And I love my friends in PNG because, I'd always say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm such a princess, but look, I'll go to your house and let's have a meal in your house. And my friends would go, no, you can't, because our house is a no-go zone place for foreigners. Oh. And I go, oh my God, so they do understand our limitations, and us having that understanding is really crucial, right? Because you can't just say, I'm not going to go to your house. What are you talking about? So I offered to go there, and they also offered to either take me or say, no, don't, because it's too much of a hassle. Right. So again, those things were the difficult parts. And, Anu was saying when they're young kids, they travel easier. That's also true. But I think it's more the character of each child. If you've got kids, you'll know that every child you have has a different character. And there are kids that will adapt to traveling easily, and there will be kids that will be, just struggling with the whole travel. My eldest daughter was struggling with the whole travel. And I remember when she graduated high school, she said, that's it, I'm going back to Australia and I'm not traveling again. And then a year into university, she decides to go into law, and she calls me and she goes, I decided to go into international law. And I go, why are you going to do that? She goes, because I realized I love traveling. And I go, oh, you gave me all this headache for nothing. But my little kids, the second batch, knew exactly what to do as soon as they boarded the plane. They knew how to set their seatbelts, even at 2 or 3. They were fine with that. There were kids in the plane that would be fuzzing, and they wouldn't, because that was the lifestyle that they grew up in.
Right.
So again, yes, depending on how young they are, they can adapt easily. But either way, you still, as the parent, have to guide them. You still, as a parent, have to, support them and explain things to them. But you also, as a parent, have to tell them that very few people have the opportunity to actually embrace a whole culture and submerge themselves into that whole lifestyle. And all these things, when they start working in the future, will actually contribute to their knowledge and to their being more, I think, employable, and I saw that with my first 2 older kids. Getting a job wasn't difficult at all for them, because they had other languages that they spoke, and they, could mingle and interact with any friends.
Sure.
My son, Dean, was in a Korean school at 3 years old. And we would always joke that he thought he was Korean.
Right.
He would smile and make his eyes smaller. And he would always do that, like the Koreans did.
Yeah.
And he really thought he was Korean. He spoke Korean fluently. My daughter, Natalie, we put in an Indonesian school as well, Indonesian kindergarten, that when she moved to Korea and was interviewed for her annual, they asked her what the nationalities of her parents was, and she said Australian and Indonesian. She thought she was Indonesian, because she spoke the language, because we lived there and we all spoke Indonesian. She just assumed we were Indonesian. So our kids really embraced it because we encouraged them to embrace it. And, again, with the experience, they know how to make friends, no matter where you stick them. It's like, I think it's more difficult for them to go back to schools in Australia where no one's moved.
Right.
Because that's now the mentality that, they can't relate to. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Varun, I would say that.
I
would say that if you are looking to move abroad and you do get a call from a headhunter offering you a job, just make sure that.
Exactly. Like which headhunter are we talking about?
Mind you, there are a lot of good in Papua New Guinea, I have to say, and that's just in the remote places.
Right.
So, I mean, they talk about that in National Geographic and stuff, and it's still something that, I guess they're just learning to develop, and they're just developing slower than what we have. But there's a lot of good and a lot of real headhunters as well, like job headhunters.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, completely understand. And so it's lovely, when you experience such cultures, and when you experience unique, or when you go through unique experiences like that, it changes you as an individual. You start to be more appreciative. You start to see the world, and then you're not in this comfort zone, and you're very adaptable, and that's fantastic. So I'm afraid we're out of time. So I'm going to ask you one last question from all my panel. So if there was one takeaway that our audience should walk away with today, like with regards to either being an expat or a training spouse, what should that one takeaway message be? Like the one tip that you can give them. So maybe Kaushika, we can start with you, and then we'll go to Anu, and then we'll end with Michelle. So Kaushika,
thank you. Listen, before I just answer, I just want to thank you for hosting this. I think it's a very topical subject. There's a lot of people interested in discussing who wants to move abroad. So I think congrats for bringing it, and I'm happy to share all the experiences. I think one thing that I would say, don't think that the migration in itself is the high point of your life, right?
Right.
If you are especially moving abroad to pursue a career, to grow, to bring up a family, right? It's the starting point, and if you love yourself, you can see massive amounts of growth and success in your life. There's a lot of challenges along the way, but you always remember, if you did take up the challenge to leave everything behind, move from your country, your family, your comfort zone, where you got educated, and you moved abroad, some other challenges that you will come across when you move into these countries are not really challenges. It'll take time for you to adapt. It'll take time for you to learn, but there is no ceiling. So don't believe that the migration in itself or the citizenship in itself in one of these countries is your high point. You're going to be very capable, believe in yourself, and continue to push, and will be very successful.
Sure. Thank you, Kaushika, for that. Anu, your
yes,
takeaway or the one message to give our audience?
Yeah. Thanks, Varun, again for hosting me, and it's a very valid subject, as Kaushika said. Yeah, my advice is, yes, of course, everybody is excited in migrating, and but before you do, and please do your homework, do your studies well. Check the background, where you are going, what exactly you need to do, what challenges you might come across. Do your studies well, and do your checks and balances. And see what you want to do in your career, and whether what you are doing right now is the right thing for you, or whether you really need to go into a different culture and start fresh, and look at your age, think about your children, think about your mental well-being, think about your siblings, parents, and how attached you are. Because if you are a youngster about 20s, your situation might be different, but if you are about 45, 50, your challenges might be different. So think about all those things, talk to the people who have gone through this, get some more ideas, understanding, get some more inputs, and do your checks and balances and take the right decision, and also be prepared both physically and mentally to to face any challenges. That's my advice.
Sure, thank you, Anu. And Michelle, your thoughts, your takeaways?
Yes, traveling and moving to new places, a lot of the times people say, I don't have a chance to reinvent myself. Well, this is your chance to reinvent yourself. When you travel to a brand new place, no one knows you. You start from scratch, you start from zero. It's a great place to start. That being said, there are a lot of mindset preparation that has to come along with you. Again, the relationship of husband and wife, when you make the decision to do this, is really important. You need to know that you're supporting each other. You need to know what the weaknesses are of each other, and you need to be there to support each other. Sometimes what happens is when you go on a posting, because the husband jumps into, or whoever is posted jumps into a position, they forget that they need to assist the one who's coming in and trying to find their way in that new place. So I think it's really important to be a supportive spouse of the trailing spouse. Otherwise, it's not going to work. The whole, happy wife, happy life works the other way around. In the diplomatic corps, there are men who are trailing spouses, and I just adore them, because I think in this day and age, to have a man supporting his wife is really amazing. It's a beautiful thing to see. And again, in that situation, you need to support your husband, because this is not what is the norm, right? The norm is for them to actually provide for the family. But as a trailing spouse, they actually are supporting the family. No matter what you decide on or how long you go in each place, you can make it work as long as you are, of one mind. You work as a team. My husband used to say, my husband always says, we make a great team. Because no matter how difficult the situation is, we make it work for our advantage. We make it work so that our kids have the best advantage. You will get better schools depending on where you're going. You can also go into crappy schools. So you have to take that into account. Are you willing for your children to have that type of education? But if you're moving for the betterment of everyone, then don't let your fear of moving stop you. Let your adventurous spirit come across, and give yourself a chance. Because if you keep delaying the move to your plans to move. Like Anu was saying, it took them forever to actually move. If you keep delaying that, you might reach a point where you're saying, oh, I'm too old to do this. And you will never know how amazing it could have been for your family. And just remember, there will be challenges when you move, but even if you don't move, there are challenges. There's always a challenge, around the corner. And it's a matter of how you respond to that challenge. So moving or not, it shouldn't be an issue if both of you agree on it. And just one last thing, as a trailing spouse, it was difficult for me to actually have a desk job, right? But it wasn't impossible for me to actually build a career. I've managed to build an amazing career in wellness, in coaching, simply because my husband and I were decided, we were clear about what each of us, what our roles were in this whole, adventure. We always say the next post is the next adventure. So, you just have to see it that way. There's nothing impossible. Sky's the limit. The only thing that's going to stop you is yourself. Varun, we can't hear you.
There you go. Yeah, I was just saying, Michelle, thank you so much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate it. And it's fantastic advice. And again, Anu, Kaushika, thanks again. Well, with that said, I'm afraid we're out of time and we come to a close of today's conversation on expats and trailing spouses, the trials and tribulations of working abroad. So big thank you again, Michelle, Anu, Kaushika. Thank you so much for being with us here today. It's been a pleasure. And do stay back a few minutes after our live session has ended for a short debrief. A big shout out goes to the Luminary team and to our audience who tuned in today. Thank you so much for joining us. And another reminder to all our viewers, all our past episodes of This, That, and the Other and the other webinar series are available on Luminary Learning Solutions YouTube page. So do swing by our YouTube page and don't forget to like our videos and hit that subscribe button. Next week, we'll be talking about another topic that's rarely discussed, and we'll be discussing about good parenting while climbing the corporate ladder. And we'll be looking at, can the both be done equally? So don't forget to tune in next week. I'm Varun Chandramohan. Thank you for joining us today. See you next Saturday.
Thank you, Arun.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Varun.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Ashka.